Hello, Sarah here. Thank you so much for listening to AJFF in Conversation, the Jewish Film Podcast. My co-host Brad and I and everyone at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival are so grateful for your support. Whether you've subscribed already in your podcast app of choice or are leaving us ratings and reviews, every little bit helps. What perhaps helps more than anything, though, is your financial support. We cannot do the podcast or any of our other virtual programs without the generous contributions of listeners like you. If you are willing and able, please consider supporting the podcast by making a donation at ajff.org/inconversation. Thank you so much, and now please enjoy the episode. Hi, I'm Sarah Glassberg.
I'm Shellie Schmals.
And this is AJFF in Conversation, the Jewish Film Podcast. As you might have noticed, I have a very special co-host for today's episode, AJFF's very own film programming manager, Shellie Schmals.
Happy to be here, and I'm excited to be co-hosting today.
So, Shellie, you and AJFF in general go way back with our guest for today's episode, right?
Yeah, I began, I first started with AJFF as a volunteer back in the early 2000s when I was on a volunteer board, as well as working just within different organizations in the Jewish community. I always knew about AJFF. My career took a couple different twists and turns, and I worked as well for different arts organizations, but eventually I got back to AJFF as a, on the more professional side starting in 2012, and then came on board full-time in 2014 as film programming manager. And that's how I met our guest today, Neil, where, I work with him throughout the year, booking films and, talking about films for our festival. So he's great. And I've actually been able to meet up with Neil at different conferences. So I think it was 2018, Neil and I and some of his coworkers as well were at the Toronto International Film Festival. So it was really nice to be able to see him kind of outside the general area of just, talking over email and over the phone. So it's, Neil's great, and I'm excited to be talking to him today.
So before founding Menemsha Films, Neil Friedman was vice president of New Line Cinema, president and COO of the Pressman Company, and co-chair of William Morris's independent feature division. Menemsha Films set a record, discovering and representing 5 Academy Award nominees for 5 years in a row.
And at AJFF, various titles from Menemsha Films have gone on to receive audience awards and jury prizes. Some titles you may recognize are Fanny's Journey, Shoelaces, and The Keeper.
Which is why we thought there is no better person to have on the podcast with us in order to talk not just about his own journey and the journey of Menemsha Films, but also the concept of AJFF Cinderella stories. Films that have gone on to have incredible journeys after they have had their world premiere with the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. The first of these films that we'll chat about today is Dough, a comedy from 2015 starring legendary actor Jonathan Pryce as an older Jewish baker who forms an unlikely friendship with his young Muslim apprentice. The film went on to gross over $1.2 million at the U.S. box office.
Then there is Heading Home, a documentary from 2017, which charts the underdog journey of Israel's national baseball team competing for the very first time in the World Baseball Classic. And now there's even a sequel in the works from the directors.
And most recently, we had our 2020 opening night film, Shared Legacies. So that is arguably just beginning its journey. The documentary about the Jewish and African American Civil Rights Alliance tells a specifically Atlanta story that is also very timely and widely relevant.
Plus, as mentioned, Neil will tell us a little bit more about Menemsha's journey, including how he finds such amazing films. And Neil, thank you for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. I've been to the festival twice, and I hope I go many more times.
Yes, and we hope you continue to come to the festival as well. And we're so excited to have you here to learn about really your journey with Menemsha Films. I think one of the things that is really kind of cool about the film industry are all these different roles that people have that most are unseen, and I think that is in the role of the distributor and what you do with Menemsha Films. I was wondering if you could kind of fill us in about how you became to create Menemsha and kind of your story about your own personal journey to the film industry.
I started out as an attorney in New York, first as a corporate attorney with a Park Avenue law firm, and then I was part of an entertainment firm in Frankfurt Garbus, which is a premier entertainment firm in New York. And from there, I went to a company that's no longer existing called Vestron, and then New Line, both in New York. And then I got a job in Los Angeles for TriStar Pictures, and came out here in 1988. I've done a lot of different things in our business. With Menemsha is the first time that I ran my own company. I used to be sort of the operating officer for someone else's company for many years, and I decided in 1998 when I started Menemsha that I was either going to go work for somebody else again or start my own, and it was a tough decision. Obviously, being an entrepreneur, also having a child at that point. But I made the decision to start Menemsha, and we started as an international sales company until 2003. And having a young daughter traveling around the world looking for the newest, hottest film was difficult. So what we did was in 2003, we transitioned to being a domestic U.S. distributor, a North American distributor of films.
And did you always focus on Jewish films?
No. I was an ethnicity and film major in college, so it's not far from what I did when I was in college. But I was interested in all kinds of art films. I wasn't interested in mainstream studio films. But as I started to distribute films, I had Jewish themed films as well as other themed films. I realized myself that I had maybe a little bit of a advantage with the Jewish themed films because I was always interested in the subject matter, and it became something that was almost easy to work on because I wanted to learn more about my culture.
That makes a lot of sense. And I would love to hear more, especially about what your process is for finding all of the incredibly, impactful and interesting films that you went on to distribute. You mentioned that your process at first was challenging. I can only imagine, traveling around looking for films. So now at this point, or maybe you can talk a little bit about the evolution to what you look for now. I mean, what is that process like? What is that journey like? What are you looking for?
It's interesting, Sarah, because when we were an international sales agent during those 5 years that I mentioned up front, 1998 to 2003, we sold almost every single film we had to Sony Classics. And I mention that because I think of us as a smaller version of Sony Classics with a Jewish focus. In other words, we're interested in well-reviewed, critic-driven films, and specifically with a Jewish or Israeli theme. And, I had grown up in the business even before I went to law school with Michael Barker and Tom at Sony Classics. We were in the 16 millimeter business together before I went to law school. So maybe just because we're the same age, or we seem to have the same sort of interest in the kinds of films that we both are interested in. And each of the films that I sold to them, a couple of them were Jewish. And I thought that in watching them release the films that I sold to them, I thought that not that they didn't have the knowledge to be able to do a good job, but I thought I brought a little more, I don't know what's the right word, maybe passion or to the release of a Jewish film, because they release 15 movies a year, and the few that I end up having with them and the one or two that were Jewish, I seem to have a almost laser-like focus on how it was doing. I remember going to the theater in Los Angeles to see those movies in the theater and see the audience that showed up for them. And I think that's probably the birth of me thinking that this may be an area that, I'm a little bit better ready to handle than my peers, and maybe this would be the area that I would concentrate in.
And Neil, I think it's so interesting. So you mentioned that you started in 1998, and I mean, just the industry itself and just technology and social media and all these different avenues, has that changed at all since you came up and started your company, about how you're finding films?
Shellie, it has the only change. First of all, the biggest change is the social media is on the advertising side and the promotion side, and we have Ben Sari of Menemsha who handles the marketing. But one thing that hasn't changed are the films themselves. What I find myself interested in is the same kind of movie that I was interested in when I was an international sales company in 1998. We had just for example, we had a movie called Divided We Fall, which is a Czech film that was nominated for an Oscar, Sony Classics, and it had a Jewish theme. And I don't think the films that we distribute today are any different than that film. We're looking for films of that quality and that originality. We have an older audience that is our primary audience, and that audience that is the same as it was in 2001 when that film was nominated for Academy Award. Here it is in 2020. We really have an audience of people that are over 55 years old. Now I'm over 55 years old. I used to ask my parents for their advice for the over 55-year-old audience. But in terms of the films themselves, I don't think it's changed at all. Just finding quality films. And obviously we had a predisposition to liking European films. And we've not only released Czech films, but released Hungarian films and Polish films, and finding exceptional films in Eastern Europe, just the same way we did way back in 1998. Those are not the only films we acquire. Obviously, we focus on Israel because we're in the Jewish sector. And I've learned over the years, taught myself, I guess, Israeli film history to be more sophisticated in looking at new Israeli films relative to the Israeli industry. But in terms of seeing films, your point is that obviously in the old days, you never could watch a film online on a link. You'd have to actually physically be either in a theater or at a festival in a theater. So that's changed where you don't have to travel as much, and that's a good thing because of COVID. So watching a film on a link, we've been doing that now for, 6, 7, 8 years. I think that I'm so used to it that obviously if I saw it in a theater, I'm getting a better impression of a film. But I think that for my own business that I better be able to watch a film on a link and be able to make a decision whether we wanted to acquire a film or not based on the link and not an in-cinema presentation. Maybe it's more difficult to watch a film on a link. Maybe we make a couple of mistakes. I mean, we didn't pick up, I'm going to blank on it for a second, the Israeli film 2 years ago that was became the Israeli entry. I'm blanking on it. But some of the mistakes that we've made is maybe if we had seen a film in a theater, we may have had a bigger perspective. But because you're seeing it on a small screen, you're quite not getting enveloped by a movie the same way you would, obviously, in a cinema. But in today's world, especially with the pandemic, this is going to be the way of the future.
So it sounds like you do a lot of your, you're choosing for films by intuition and like what feels right. Do you see when you're choosing those films to take on, do you see a long, successful journey for the films? Like, can you see the type of path a specific film or type of film can go?
Not always. And primarily, the answer would be no. So the simple, a lot of this distribution world is luck. I would say half the time, or maybe a third of the time, we probably can make a good guesstimate as to how a film will perform. But the rest of the films, whether it's a half or 2/3 of them, the films take on their own momentum. When we acquired Doe, for instance, I never thought that film was anything other than a festival film. I had no concept that this film could, be successful in the theaters. And then, this is the way we sort of teach ourselves. We give ourselves a little bit of an advantage because we show the film first in this film festival circuit, and we're able to gauge the audience reaction and hear about the audience reaction when we can't be there physically. And we gain additional knowledge about a film that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get if we went right into theatrical. If I didn't have the film festival circuit for Doe, probably never it would have been released in one theater in one city, and that would have been the end of it. But by virtue of its presentation and the reaction that I heard from the audience from a group of festivals, I started to think of the film as a theatrical film, and then I started to think of the film as maybe had a chance to be successful. Even you learn as you go. Even when you theatrically release a film, you learn as you go. I'll give you a good example of that. Woman's Balcony. And when we acquired the film, we knew it was a quality film, but I didn't know whether that film would be interesting for the American Jewish audience as opposed to the Israelis that live in America, Jewish. And so what we did was we released the film in the two cities first, which had the largest Israeli population in America, and that's Los Angeles and Florida. And not knowing, mostly thinking that it wouldn't be loved by American Jews, that it was a little bit too Israel-centric. But we quickly learned, especially from the Los Angeles release, where on the other side of the hill here, we have a bigger Israeli community. And on the west side of Los Angeles, we have less of an Israeli community. And on the west side, the film did better than it did in the Israeli side. And we started to think that, maybe we have a chance to have an American audience for this film. And we started and that was the first knowledge that I had that this film could actually work with the American Jewish audience. Same kind of idea that you learn as you go. And we were smart and lucky at the same time to start with the Israeli two cities. If I had opened the film in Atlanta, there weren't a lot of Israelis. And I was doing it mostly for to be careful about the money that was spent on the film. So I was making sure that we did well in the first two cities. You always want to start in the cities that you think you're going to do the best in. And it turned out that we discovered that the film could work for the American audience as well as the Israeli audience living in America. You know, I have a story about every film that's not dissimilar to Doe and Woman's Balcony. That, you know, generally speaking, we learn as we go, and we you know, it depending on reviews, depending on a little luck, a film picks up a momentum that you can't prejudge.
I'm so glad that you mentioned both of those films. They're two personal favorites of mine, and Doe in particular was one of these, again, AJFF Cinderella stories that we definitely wanted to talk about today. You kind of already touched on this, but I'm so fascinated by this idea that it's sort of a learn as you go process, even within one particular film, not just learning from one film and then applying a similar outlook or strategy to another film. I mean, with Doe, it's just incredible that this was an independent comedy from the UK, and you elevated it to this $1 million+ endeavor. And so I'd love to hear before we move on to some other films that have had sort of different journeys, of course, I'd love to just hear a little bit more of specifics around that touch and go kind of process, what the rollout was like, and you know, how you chose to do what you did with the film once you moved it from festival circuit to a theatrical release for Doe.
It's a good one to talk about, Sarah, because on that film, we knew we even went a step further. We knew that the film would work in certain cities, and we didn't know it would work nationally. And usually when we're not sure about, and sometimes I should say, not always, but sometimes when we're not sure how broad a film is, we start, as I said before, we pick the city where we think it's most likely to do the best. That's what we did with Woman's Balcony, with picking those two Israeli cities where the Israelis live. But with Doe, we went to Florida. And we knew, obviously, in the winter, when there's a lot of people from the north that go down south and go to Florida for the winter, it didn't work there. It would not work anywhere. And I'll tell you, when we first started, we had no interest whatsoever from the Landmark chain. We needed to make a big gross in Florida to get the attention of the Landmark circuit. Because we weren't going to be accepted as a film that would play the Landmark circuit unless we did well in Florida. So we had a real goal in mind with the Florida release, and we were lucky enough to do, I think, $275,000 just in South Florida. And we played that film all the way into March when people started to go up north. And then we released the film in April and May up north, and Landmark wanted to play the film because they saw the tremendous gross that we had in Florida. And so that's a lucky, event also. Maybe we picked the right place to show off the film. But if we started in New York, we never would have had Landmark for that film. We make different decisions about where to open a film based on what qualities that are unique about a particular film. If we think it's going to be unquestionably a well-reviewed film, that's when we would open in New York. But if we think we have an audience film, we'd open in Florida. And just to finish the story, I mean, Doe wasn't that well reviewed, and it still did over $1 million.
I just think that that's incredible how one little decision can alter the journey of these films. And I think, for me, part of what I love about Doe is, just before we move on, is just that it's this light comedy, but it also has all of these poignant moments and kind of those wonderful cross-generational, cross-cultural kind of themes in it. So And I think on the topic of cross-generational, that might be a good segue into our next film, which is Heading Home.
Well, this is the one I would say is one that I pretty much thought it would do what it ended up doing. I knew I'm a baseball lover, and we released way back when a film called Hank Greenberg, and this is a particular subject that I'm really interested in, a Jewish theme and a baseball theme, and I knew we had an audience. That was for sure. I wasn't sure that we had a critics film, but I knew we had an audience film with the film, and I knew that the audience would be everywhere. Very simply, you guys are in Atlanta. We know there's, I think, 32 baseball teams in the major leagues. And we basically, what I did first was go down the list of where every major league baseball team was and think of those cities as the city we would release the film in. And we started off in Boston. I think the year after, either the year that the Boston Red Sox won the pennant, the World Series, excuse me. And obviously there was an especially keen interest in baseball because they had just won the World Series. But the filmmakers had a relationship with one of the producers had a relationship with the actual Boston Red Sox management. So they helped us promote the film in Boston, and we had a terrific opening and a full theater for a whole bunch of weeks. And that turned out to be a good thing as well, in terms of timing, having the Red Sox just won the World Series. And I, as a kid, my mom is from Boston. I know I've been enough in Boston to know how baseball crazy Boston is. So I had that knowledge from my own personal experience that would be a great city to open the film in. That is something that a film that is on a baseball subject. So we didn't. There were other cities where we were able to engage the management of the baseball franchise. Cincinnati comes to mind. I can't remember. Maybe San Francisco Giants. I can't remember what happened with the Braves in Atlanta, but they may have been part of that as well. But whenever we were able to get the baseball franchise organization to co-promote the release of the film when it released, I imagine that we did better in that particular city. But it's interesting, usually you'd look at what they call the top 25 ADI markets, which is advertising markets that television uses as your prime list of cities. But in this case, I looked at the 32 cities that had a baseball franchise and didn't look at the ADI markets. And I said to myself, well, I've got to release this film in Pittsburgh and Minneapolis and Tampa. And I went through the entire list of 32 baseball franchises and thought that this is the way to release a baseball movie. So I did something a little unorthodox with that one.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a special thing for us at AJFF to be able to world premiere the film. I mean, the excitement from the filmmakers was just off the chain. So it was I just remember being in the theater and seeing the excitement from the audience and just being able to engage with the filmmakers at the Q&A and how they were able to bring a group of Jewish American baseball players over to Israel. Was fantastic. And so do you maintain a relationship with the directors?
Yes, I do. I'll tell you a story, though, Shellie. When I was pitching us working on the film, Menemsha, the filmmakers had always started their festival run at Tribeca. And they said to me that they wanted to go to Tribeca. And I said to them, no. I said, it was not a short conversation. It was a long conversation. I said, I have a better place for us to start. And I said, the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. And that's because of the audience, and what I know to be the audience response to a film like this. And I was very forceful with the filmmakers in saying that Atlanta Jewish was better than Tribeca. I mean, they're both New York. They're all New Yorkers, so their predilection was to stay in New York. But I said, this is the best way to go with this film, because you want to start off with, like a firecracker. And, they made fun of me, thinking that, a Jewish film festival circuit is a better way to go than going with a big, prestigious New York-based film festival. But I was completely convinced. I didn't have any hesitation whatsoever that Atlanta Jewish was the better choice. And I got to say that without Atlanta Jewish, I don't think the film would have done anywhere near as well. Because what you always want to do, it's sort of like having a snowball at the top of the hill. You got to build up the momentum, and you start to let the ball roll down the hill and let the snowball get bigger and bigger. And if you're starting in the middle of the hill, which Tribeca would have been, and would have gotten lost at Tribeca, you're not going to do as well. And the word of mouth that came out of Atlanta was 3 times greater than it could have been at Tribeca. There's no question about it. So that turned out to be the right, there was the one and only choice. But from the filmmaker's point of view, because they're not in the Jewish niche like I am, they wanted to go for the prestigious film festival, or the one that they knew from being New Yorkers, which was Tribeca. So we had long discussions about, before they said okay, about my opinion as opposed to their opinion about where the film should premiere.
Wow, that's such an insane and awesome story. I think another kind of indication of that, at least from my personal perspective, and Shellie shared her sort of her experience when we showed the film at the festival. But for me, what's really special about this film, and I kind of segued with this idea of cross-generational, and you shared your experience with baseball as a kid. And so for me, what was really special with this film is we kind of brought the film back for a second screening, a sort of special encore screening as the inaugural event that we held at the City Springs Performing Arts Center here in the Atlanta area. And we had our Mensch on the Bench mascot interacting with the Braves mascot. We had this wonderful partnership with the Braves. That speaks again to your kind of experience and strategy with regard to big Major League Baseball teams and all of that. But the highlight of all these highlights was just seeing all of these children seeing this documentary with their parents and their grandparents. It was just this family outing, and it was perfect weather, and it was just it almost felt like that thrill of being at a baseball game, at least on kind of an emotional level. So the power of this film to do that, and the idea that is just another kind of feather in the cap of how this film played and how it started at AJFF. I guess before we move on to our third and final specific film that we want to talk to you about, was that you said that this was a film where you kind of saw the journey it would have in a way. And so I'm just curious if that aspect of it for you was something that you predicted, this ability to, to be a family film or bring different generations together to experience this story.
Well, I'll tell you something. I was right on some issues and wrong on one particular issue. I had the experience with Hank Greenberg, the Hank Greenberg film, where we played over a Father's Day, the second or third weekend, I can't remember, of the release. And we saw an incredible amount of grandparents taking their grandchildren to see the film. So I saw Heading Home as a family film, without question. And also, I saw it as a female film as well as a male film. I didn't see really a distinction, because it's a family film, and the guys, it's just a film of people that you like. It doesn't, there's no. The best thing about Heading Home is you like the people that you see on screen. So whether it's male or female as an audience, it's the same response. But so that I knew about. but what I miscalculated was, and I could see why I made the mistake. I'm originally from New York, and that's a big baseball town also. Except that, and I told the producers that we would finish with a tremendous crescendo in New York when we released the film in New York. But what I misjudged is that New York is too big a city and too many things going on for a sort of an independent film like that. And it got smothered. I mean, we didn't get any visibility. We didn't get any, it didn't make it through the density of so many movies being released that same day and so many choices. I think we had the Yankees helping us a little bit, but it didn't matter. In a big city like New York, it became just a small speck on the screen. And I was, I'm a little bit of a promoter, and I told the filmmakers that we would have a big success in New York, and I was 100% wrong. So, I make mistakes. That's what happens. I mean, I had the best intentions. And one of the things that you do with filmmakers, if you give them, if you get their hopes up that you're going to be successful and then it doesn't happen, then they really get disappointed. So I made a double mistake. I thought that New York would work, and I also told them that New York would work. So when it didn't work, I became the bad guy, which is okay. I mean, that's that's part of the job. You're not going to know it all, and sometimes you're going to make mistakes. It's not a science. It's not a exact science. So that was disappointing, and they gave me a hard time, by the way, that it didn't do well in New York, because they're from New York and they thought it would. That's also something that was a little personal to them.
Well, it sounds like you have to wear a lot of different hats as a distributor working with films individually. So the next film, it's a very special one to Atlanta. And I think this is different than the other, than Doe and Heading Home. But the story about Shared Legacies and how you've been able to work with the film and the filmmakers, especially in such a really unique time during the pandemic and what's happening in our country. It's a very much an Atlanta story that world premiered here at our festival in 2020. Just curious as to how you've been able to see Atlanta stories reflected into other communities, and maybe a little bit about how you've seen other communities, come together around, our shared legacies.
Yeah, this is a completely different set of circumstances, Shellie. I'm a lot older than you guys, and I grew up a little bit in the '60s, and I can't say that I went down south for the civil rights movement, but I was young enough to have followed it and care about it. So I had my own personal sensitivity about the subject matter. And, obviously it's hard not to love Martin Luther King. And he's from Atlanta. So I got on a plane and took a red eye to Atlanta to see the film on opening night. I wasn't working on the film yet. And having been present at the opening night at your festival and seeing, I had spoken to the filmmaker on the phone many times, but the fact that I cared enough to be there for opening night, I think helped. And also we got to meet face to face. But I think there's, it's a wonderful film, a fantastic film. It had a great opening night. But there's also something that happened with that film that made it even more important. And that's happened very recently. And that's the Black Lives Matter movement, that's picked up in the last 6 months, I guess it is. And that gave tremendous momentum for the film that I couldn't have even guessed would happen when I was at the screening in Atlanta, because we had not had that, we had not had that George Floyd incident yet happen. That happened later. And then, then that movement really started to pick up with, unfortunately, a lot of other incidents like that. And that helped the film, become the story of today. And that's what it is. It's the story of today, that film. And, I'm knocked out about how well the film is doing. I told the filmmaker it was going to be very successful, but it's surpassed even my guesstimate as to what to have expected from the film. And that's the fun side of this job. I mean, to have a film that everybody wants to show.
Sure. So that's what I was going to ask you. Have you seen different communities? I mean, are they coming to you now asking for the film kind of as an educational tool to use as a community bridge for conversations?
I would say educational, but more in terms of an obligation, that it's almost like a social studies class. Maybe that is education. I mean, it's in other words, for the Jewish audience, it doesn't matter what part of the country, whether it's the South or the North, everybody thinks that this is a, Jewish audience or people that are in charge of film festivals have made a decision that this is a film that must be shown. That this is part of what a Jewish film festival is. That you're presenting, tolerance. Which is, obviously for a persecuted group like we have been through, our history, to have sensitivity to others that have been persecuted as well. And, that I'm so happy that places that I didn't even expect would be so, moved to show the film, whether it's Northern Louisiana or, Albany, New York. Everybody's come out and wanted to show this film, and there's been really nobody who's not wanted to show the film. So you can be good at what you do, but this is if the Black Lives Matter movement hadn't become the focus over the last 6 months, Shared Legacies would have been successful, but nowhere near as successful as it is now. And that's part of the luck of timing. That comes with being a film distributor.
I think what's really special about the film too is that I remember having the conversation with you about how you are updating the film to kind of reflect what, some things that were happening with George Floyd at the moment before it was, before it was being distributed to other cities. So it's kind of been a little bit of a work in progress as well.
Right. And what happened there, Shellie, is that we received so many invitations from Jewish film festivals that it didn't make sense for us to stop and modernize the film to present events. I mean, we played 40 film festivals already, and I think we're only halfway there. And maybe after we play the Jewish circuit, so to speak, that would be the time to give the film a second life and to contemporize it in its second presentation. And I think maybe this is, I don't know, the word we use in the film business is evergreen, meaning that it's always topical. But, I would like to, hopefully that this legacy, this shared legacy, is almost with the film is almost branded the fact that Jews and African Americans have similar history and similar difficulty in being persecuted, and the title of the film has sort of helped I think bring Jews and African Americans together even in the present days. And I think we're just beginning. I think we haven't even gone on to the educational side of this, meaning universities and colleges or high schools and junior high schools. or middle schools, as they said, as probably you call it. In California, they call them middle schools, and where I'm from in New York, they used to call them junior high schools. But I think this film can play to every audience. African American, the goal was always to be able to show it at the African American Museum in D.C. I think that will probably happen in its second derivation. But this is the topic. This is obviously one of the subjects that the two candidates for president talk about in debates. So you can't have more, be more upfront with an issue that's so present than this, and that's become another great piece of luck that's happened over the last 6 months. People are more and more aware of the difficult legacy of African Americans in over the last 6 or 8 months, and people are reaching out to learn more about it. And we're still in the early stages here. We don't know how far this will go, this film, but it's already gone farther than I thought it would.
Yeah, it's an extremely important, timely, resonant film. Obviously, everything we've been talking about. I almost wish that I'm so grateful that this film exists, and to see the journey that it's on, and to know that, how you're shepherding that. It's almost just kind of unfortunate that we are still living in times where it continues to be so incredibly relevant and resonant. But the good thing, right, is that we have films like this to go on this journey, to get in front of people and educate them. I mean, that's the hope. I think this kind of brings us nicely to a lot of what we've been talking about today with you, is its notions of location and strategy around, who do we want to bring this film to and where. And we touched on the idea of technology and sort of how that has evolved certain aspects of your work and your process. But I think this kind of brings us to a point where we want to talk about the internet a little bit more, in terms of your streaming platform, HiFlix, and how that is sort of the future almost of a lot of things. As you said, people watching links instead of going to theaters, especially with everything going on in the world now. So I think to close us out, Shellie and I would love to ask you a couple questions about HiFlix, starting just with this question of why did you feel that was an important evolution for Menemsha and an important space to start putting your films in?
Well, I would say that the film festivals are now, online as well. So, I mean, a lot of people doubted that film festivals can succeed, flourish online. I didn't. I never doubted that film festivals could flourish online. And the reason I believe that is because I'm lucky in the sense that I see film festivals as still a growth business. I think that the interest in your audience to come to your auditoriums, your cinemas, is so great each year. It seems to be greater, that when we had to go to a link scenario, that I didn't think there would be a fall off, because the interest in seeing new films about new Jewish issues would supersede the technology issues. So with HiFlix, I remember I said I was an ethnicity major in college, which really meant that I studied Jewish immigration to the United States. So I always had this interest in this subject area. My father's side were German Jews, and my mother's side were Russian Jews, and they came 30 years difference. One came in, actually not 30 years, 25 years. The Germans came in 1880, and the Russian Jews came in 1905. So I studied those two migrations, and what happened to us is that we started a couple of things. One of which is that we loved what we do, and we wanted to do it on a grander scale. We always did. I mean, we acquire 15 films a year, but the good news is there's so many great films we can even acquire more. But one thing happened to us that made us start to think about starting our own channel is that we had 3 films in a row that did over $1 million. And the third film, 1945, which, you played in Atlanta, which is an incredible film, a 97% Rotten Tomatoes rating. The first 2 films that we did over $1 million sold to Netflix. And 1945 was the third. And we're always told that if you did $1 million at the box office, then Netflix was going to buy your film. And they didn't. So I said to myself, well, this is my specialty. I'm in the Jewish world. I can't be dependent on Netflix to when I have a film that succeeds. I need to start my own channel so that worst comes to worst, that I'll have my own channel to put these great films on. And then I started to see sometimes when I would be trying to get a film that Netflix would beat me out and I wasn't able to get a film. So I knew that we needed to have what we call, a Jewish version of Netflix, because there was, we're in this little, specialty within a specialty, Jewish themed movies within the art film world. The art film world is 3% of 100% of the films, and probably the Jewish specialty is like 0.5%. So, I'm so deep into, the love for this area, and I see a lot of people feel the same way about this, and I see that, be honest, from the festivals. I watch every single festival each year become more, not necessarily more successful, but that the passion is greater from the audience. I mean, obviously, you get bigger, but that the audience seems to more and more love going to the film festival, and that was a mirror of how I felt about the movies in this niche, these Jewish themed movies. And I thought that there would be a bit bigger platform to share that beyond the film festivals. And that's really where we came up with HiFlix, and the basis of which.
That's really awesome. It's kind of, like I think about what the feeling of a festival brings to people, and what, how it benefits just an audience, and being able to see international film and experience, a kind of a community together. And, I guess my final question for you, because you've kind of talked about what your challenges and opportunities are. What do you see for the future of, Jewish and independent film?
Well, I think there's only, I see it as, I have good feelings about the future, because I don't think the film festivals, even with the pandemic, I mean, and even the fact that you're online temporarily, I don't see the excitement about a new group of films coming available in Atlanta each year via the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival diminishing. If anything, I see it increasing. So I think that will only get better and bigger. And I think you guys will flourish, continue to flourish, I should say, because obviously you've done an amazing job. And I think the future is only good for you in terms of your film festival. I think you'll get more people that want to come every year. It'll become more of a have to be there kind of event. And what HiFlix does is not compete with the film festivals. We did that on purpose, because we wanted to be never have a film on HiFlix that would be available to a film festival. So we put a film that's available to like Shared Legacies, let's say, would not be available to the HiFlix for 2 years from now. So there would never be any competition with even a synagogue wanting to play the movie and HiFlix. And I think what we're doing is growing an audience, and that audience also is interested in seeing older films that are on HiFlix and also seeing a greater variety of films. So they each have their place. I mean, I think we're all lucky. The three of us are all lucky that we work in this space where people really are passionate about it. And, we know when people come out of the theater with a big smile on their face after they see a movie at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, that's the best feeling you could have. I mean, I'm sure the two of you, when you're seeing people walk out of a theater and people say, with a big smile and they say, thank you or something of that nature, or that was a great film. There's no better feeling than that. And it's not different for me. It's the same thing. And those who remained, last year was that, and I know it had a great presentation at Atlanta. And there's always a new film it's going to tell a different story that the audience that we both love, the Jewish audience, really responds to. I think, Jews love, we're readers, we're big, we're educators. So sometimes instead of reading, we have a lot of the book clubs, probably a disproportionate group of book clubs are probably Jewish people, and it's no different than film. It's the same thing. It's educational, and the best films are educational. So it's just a different media in which you're presenting information to people about your history, and that's what drives me. Is always finding, what drives me to want to be involved in a film is learning something that I didn't know, and it never seems to stop. That's the good news about it.
Well, I think that is the perfect place to end things. I think it's a hopeful place to end things. I love the idea of festivals and theatrical movie going, and something like HiFlix can coexist, serve sort of different purposes, but kind of under this umbrella of education, entertainment. And Neil, we are just so grateful for you taking the time to chat with us about all of this today. Thank you again so much for being here.
Yeah, Shellie and Sara, you have to realize, though, that what you have done in Atlanta is part of the passion that I have. I mean, you have shown what can be done. And, that helps me be more confident that what I'm doing every day is a growth area. And, I want to thank you guys, because what you've done with the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival is absolutely unique and special. And that's just, to me, that's a determinant of where I think this whole industry of Jewish films is going. I think it's going to get bigger. And that's represented by how the growth that Atlanta has undergone over the last couple of years and keeps going. So we're all part of the same ecosystem, of loving this area of film and learning.
Thank you so much, Neil. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, and I'm glad that we got all these wonderful things, down on record. It's awesome.
Until next time, we are your host and very special guest host, Sara Glassberg.
And Shellie Schmals.
Also producing is Chris Holland, who is also our technical director and editor.
And of course, a very special thank you again to our special guest, Neil Friedman of Menemsha Films. The music you've been humming along to all show is by the incredibly talented Joe Alterman. Please look him up wherever you get your music.
You can always find more from us, as well as show notes, at ajff.org/inconversation. Our email address is inconversation@ajff.org. Drop us a line with questions we might just answer in a future episode.
Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast app of choice, or check out our YouTube channel for new episodes. Give a rating, give a review. Every little bit helps.
And we cannot continue to do this podcast or any of our other digital programs without your support. So if you are willing and able, please also consider making a donation at ajff.org/inconversation. And of course, please do tell your friends about the show. Until next time, goodbye.